So the last but not the least, the final type of communicative functions that we are going to learn are the English language functions with exponents, and it is a huge type of communicative functions as there are numerous things included in here, and we'll watch them one by one. So here we go. So the first type is expressing sorrow. For example, alas, he's dead, which means you are sad about something. It's great pity that she has moved from here. So the examples that are given here are like person A says, have you heard anything about Raju? B, he's in the hospital. C, the report says he's dead. A and B, alas, he's dead. Second example, A, Karuna does not live here anymore. B, is it so? C, it's a great pity that she moved from here. So the next type is illustrating, or like if you want to give an instance or an example about something. So by giving an illustration, for example, for instance, etc., or by showing a table, a figure, or a picture. So the examples are given here. Person A says, at least one person, for example, the president himself, supports the proposal for disarmament. Second example is A says, the budget allocation has been illustrated in the following bar chart. So these are the general types of communicative function which are used to either give an example or to relay an information of some kind about illustrations in a bar chart or a graph or a picture. So the third type are seeking permission. For example, may I come in, sir? Please let me have the book today. So the example that is given here is a conversation between the student and a teacher. So the students ask, may I come in, sir? Teacher, yes, you may. What do you want? Student, please let me have the book today. Teacher, okay, you have my permission. 4. The next type is reprimanding or scolding. If you want to scold someone, if you want to like thrash someone verbally. So the example that is given here, you should be ashamed of yourself. Or, how rude of you. The example that is given here is a conversation between Peter and Mary. Peter says, why did you go to meet him? Mary, I wanted to. Peter, you should be ashamed of yourself. Mary, why? Peter, I think you love him more than me. Mary, how rude of you. So I guess Peter is quite insecure of his relationship with Mary. So the fifth type is expressing an agreement or a sense of agreement if you agree with something. For example, I'd be glad to. That's what I was thinking. So the example that is given here is a conversation between a person A and person B. So person A says, would you like to attend the party? B says, I'd be glad to. So he's agreeing to something that is A is asking. So A says, I hope there'll be much pleasure. B says, B also agrees to that, saying, that's what I was thinking. So the sixth type is requesting. For example, would you please guide us? Or please walk ahead. So it can be questions or like statements as we discussed earlier. So the illustrations or an example that is given here is a conversation again between person A and person B. So person A says, I think it's too far. B, yes, truly. A, would you please guide us? B, it's my pleasure. A, thank you, please walk ahead. Seventh type is expressing an obligation. If you do not agree to something, then you have to express it by some way, right? So example that is given here is, you must present the report by tomorrow, or you'd better not make another mistake. So example that is given here is a conversation between officer and Ramesh. Officer says, Ramesh, you must present the report by tomorrow. Ramesh says, okay sir, I'll make all the corrections by today evening. Please be sure. Officer, you'd better not make another mistake. So the eighth type is introducing two friends of yours who might not know each other. So you would say something like, may I introduce you to Ram or Sham? So the other response that you might get is glad to meet you. So the illustration or the example that is given here is I. Bob, may I introduce you to Nisha? Bob, glad to meet you, Nisha. Nice to meet you too. Ninth type is cautioning or alerting someone. Example, look out. I warn you, it's going to rain. So the example that is given here is a conversation between Shyam and Ram. So Ram says, look out, don't go out. Sorry, look out, don't go out. Shyam says, I must. Ram, I warn you, it's going to rain. Shyam, all right, I consider the situation. So the 10th type is attracting attention. So if you want someone to focus upon you or be attentive towards you, you might use these kind of communicative functions. So for example, hey, you, or excuse me. The example that is given here is A says, hey, you. B says, to me. A says, excuse me, here's a letter for you. B, thank you. So A is basically gaining the attention for himself by asking, hey, you. And B is countering him, saying, to me. So you get it, right? So 11th type is expressing enthusiasm, a sense of enthusiasm. If you feel quite excited or enthusiastic about something, then you might use this kind of social functions, or you can see this kind of this kind of communicative functions being used. So for example, you might say something like, that sounds fantastic, or that's a good idea. The example is given showing a conversation between a couple of friends. Sohan says, hey Mohan, what are you doing? Mohan says, I'm reading a letter. I passed the written exam. Madan, wow, that's fantastic. Mohan, I'm preparing hard for the interview now. Sohan, that's a good idea. Madan, we wish you best of luck. Mohan, thanks. The 12th one is thanking. For example, thank you very much, or something like that was very kind of you. So expressing thankfulness or acknowledgement. A says, I've deposited fees for you. B says, thank you very much. A, besides, here's a check worth rupees 5,000. B, it's very kind of you. So the 13th type is expressing indifference. So if you do not know, like, why is one situation different from the other, you might use this kind of communicative functions. For example, what does it matter? Or like, it's not worth the effort. Example, A says, I think you should work hard for the exam. B says, what does it matter? A says, you can pass the exam. B says, it's not worth the effort. So they might be talking about an exam which is quite easy, and A is asking B to study hard, but B says it's not worth the effort. So the 14th type is prohibiting. If you forbid someone to do something or go somewhere, you might use this kind of communicative functions. For example, you must not go there, or you ought not to waste the money on smoking. For example, you must not go there. A says. B says, why? A, they are not good. That's a bad company. B says, I really don't think so. A says, you ought not to waste money on smoking. They encourage you for smoking. So B is wanting to be friends or go to some people who generally smoke, and A does not want B to go in that situation. So he is using the prohibitive kind of communicative function. And the 15th type is seeking clarification. If you want to be clear upon something, then you might use these kind of things. For example, what do you mean by it? Or does it mean that you don't want to marry me? The example that is given here is A says, I'm leaving for my village. B says, what do you mean by it? A says, I must leave the town now. B says, does it mean that you don't want to marry me? A says, you're right. My parents have called me back for the engagement. B says, oh no. The 16th type is seeking information. For example, why are you interested in learning English language? Do you want to make it as a profession? For example, teacher says, why are you interested in learning English language? Student, simply because it creates many opportunities. Teacher, do you want to make it as a part of your profession? Student, naturally. 17th type is expressing good wishes. For example, best of luck, please give my best wishes to uh, Ram or Sam or anything. There's a conversation that is shown here as an example where Rinku says, Raju, best of luck. Raju says, thank you. Rinku says, have a good journey and please give my best wishes to Preeti. Raju says, okay, and thank you Rinku for such good wishes. Expressing compliments. If you want to compliment someone about something, uh, passing them some good notes, so you might use communicative functions like this. For example, what a nice handwriting. I must compliment you on your progress. For example, a teacher and student are talking here. Teacher says, what a nice handwriting. Student says, thank you. Teacher, I must compliment you on your progress. Student says, thank you very much, sir. 19th type is expressing condolence. For example, I'm sorry to hear about your parents. You must feel terrible about losing your parents together. The example that is given here is uh, person 1 says, F1 says, I'm sorry to hear about your parents. F2 says, thank you. F1 says, you must feel terrible about losing your parents together. F2 says, it's up on God. Nothing can be done. So 20th type is expressing sympathy. For example, what a pity. I'm sorry to hear about that. The example that is given here is person 1 says, I'm sorry to hear about your mother. F2 says, what a pity. F3 says, it's upon God. The 21st type is extending an invitation. For example, you want to come along with us. May I have the pleasure of the dance? For example, the conversation is given here between Mary, Rita, and Nisha. So Mary says, we're going to shopping. You want to come along with us? Rita says, sorry, I'm rather going for dancing. Nisha says, may I have the pleasure of the dance? Rita says, yes, we'd better go to the hall. Afterwards, we shall go to the market. So the 22nd type is proposing a toast or like cheering upon something or raising a toast, a glass of wine to celebrate something. For example, cheers. The example that is given here is person A says, let's enjoy the beer. Cheers. B says, cheers. C says, here's to your job. D says, and here's to your health. The other type is seeking confirmation. If you want to be confirmed about something, then you might as well use these kind of communicative functions. For example, Ram is married, isn't he? Are you confirmed? For example, here A says, Ram is married, isn't he? B says, yes, he is. A says, are you confirmed? B says, yes, I am. I'm sure about it. The 24th type is seeking favors. For example, can you do me a favor? Let me do this work. Will you? The example that is given here is a conversation between person A and person B. Person A says, hello friend, can you do me a favor? B says, what is this? A says, let me do the work. Will you? B says, well, this work is under my responsibility. Therefore, I must do it. 25th type is directing. For example, turn left, cross the road, something like that. The example that is given here is person A says, would you help me by directing to the nearest bank? B says, go straight, then turn left, walk a few paces ahead, cross the road on your right, you can easily reach the bank. The 26th type is instructing. So if you want to give a certain set of instructions to someone, then you might as well use this kind of communicative functions. For example, first of all, you have to do this and do that. So the example that is given here is, can you instruct me how to fry an egg? A is asking, and B is answering it by saying, certainly. First of all, you should take an egg, a frying pan, a little mustard oil. Next, light the stove. Set the pan on it, then pour the oil. Break the egg into a bowl. Mix a pinch of salt with it, then pour it into the pan. Turn it over, then the fries is ready. So it is a pretty clear instruction on how to make an omelette or a fried egg. The another type, or the 27th type, is encouraging. If you want to encourage someone, for example, you might use something like keep it up, or like you are on a good progress. For example, a conversation between a teacher and a student is given here. Teacher says, well done boy. Student says, thank you sir. Teacher, keep it up, you are on a good progress. Student, well, I've been working hard. The other type is persuading. If you want to convince someone to do something, then you might as well use these kind of communicative functions. So here, for example, you say, I would play the role if I were you. That's true, but if I had the opportunity, then I might have taken it. For example, A says, I'm going to change my role now. B says, oh, all right. However, I would play the role if I were you. A says, that's true, but if I play the role, I shall lose a lot. The 29th type is threatening. If you want to threaten someone, or if somebody threatens someone over something, then they might use these kind of words or like functions. So for example, I'll report you if you do that. Don't dare tell lies. For example, a conversation between A and B. Person A says, I'll report you if you do that. B says, I must do that for my benefit. I shall tell them lies later. A says, don't dare tell lies. I believe that you'll lose your job. 30th type is recommending. For example, I advise you to see a doctor. You'd better visit an eye specialist. So you are recommending something to someone, like you want them to do something. So for example, A says, I have a little problem in my eye. So here's a problem. B says, I'd advise you to see a doctor. So he's advising, basically suggesting. And A says, I'm also thinking about that. B says, you'd better visit an eye specialist. A says, thanks, I'll do that. 31. It says expressing preferences. So if you want to do something over some other thing, for example, I like football rather than cricket, or like I prefer to stay in a house rather than in a hotel. I prefer tea to coffee. So these are used somewhat like this. So there's an example. A says, where do you wish to stay? He's asking a question. B says, I'd prefer to stay in a house rather than hotel. A says, okay, what would you like to have now, tea or coffee? B says, I prefer tea to coffee. So B likes tea rather than coffee. So 32nd type is expressing interest. So if you are actually interested in something, you might use these kind of communicative functions to relay the information. For example, I'm interested in music. That sounds interesting. The example that is given here is A says, what is your hobby? B says, I'm really interested in music. A says, that sounds interesting. Do you play any instrument? B says, yes, I do. I play guitar and drum. The 33rd type is expressing pleasure. So this is a very nice place to visit. So the person is happy about like the place being nice. So, I enjoy visiting this place. The example that is given here is S1 says, look at the scene from here. S2 says, splendid. This is a very nice place to visit. S1 says, I always enjoy visiting this place. 34. Expressing approval. So you're expressing that you approve for something. For example, excellent. I approve of the plan. The example that is given here is A said, I think you have gone through the plan. B says, of course, and I approve of the plan. Who has prepared it? A says, I have prepared it myself. B says, excellent. A says, thanks. 35th type is expressing surprise. For example, what a surprise. It was beyond belief. The example that is given here is a conversation between person A, person B, and person C. A says, friends, I have become topper in the college. B says, what a surprise. C says, it is beyond belief. The other type is expressing or making promises. For example, I promise I'll be quick. He promises a good reward to me. So some kind of promises. For example, A says, will you come early? B says, I promise I'll be quick. A says, strange. What's speciality today? B says, I must be quick because he promises a reward to me. A says, it's so, haha. 37. Expressing disappointment. If you are sad about something, if you are disappointed with something, if you wanted to something to happen some other way, then you might express it by using these kind of communicative functions. So if only I had done this, then I would have gotten that. Or like, I'm really disappointed that he did not get his job done. The example that is given here is A says, if only I had been at home at this hour of emergency. B says, why? Aren't you safe here? A says, yes, I am, but I'm really disappointed that I have to stay so far. 38 is expressing impatience. So you are like really impatient over something. So you have had enough of something. For example, I'm fed up with your demands. You're beyond belief. So you have to realize that the same things, like for example, you're beyond belief here is used to expressing impatience, but earlier it is beyond belief was used to express surprise. So this is the beauty of English language. It really matters on your tone, on the situation that you use it, the uses of communicative function, and the information that it relays. So it is said that English is a funny language. So we might as well have to deal with it. The example that is given here is a conversation between a husband and a wife. Husband says, I'm fed up with your demands. Wife, you're beyond belief. I never saw you so impassioned. Husband says, you're annoying the hell out of me with your so many demands. The 39th type is expressing disgust. For example, it's disgusting. He's gross. For example, a conversation between Jack and Bush. Jack says, well, how did you like John's performance? Sorry. Jack says, well, how did you like John's performance tonight? Bush, I thought he was really gross, drunk, telling dirty jokes and stories and giving all the single women a hard time. Weren't you disgusted by him? Jack says, yeah, I was too. That's certainly not a good way to behave in a party. The 40th type is expressing indignation. For example, you don't like the messy situation that is in front of you. So you'll use the sentences like, what a nuisance! Damn! For example, A says, well, I've never been in such environment. B, what a nuisance! C, damn, I'll never come here again. The 41st type is expressing ability. You are able to do something, then you might as well express in terms of the words. So you might use something like, I can run faster than you, or I'm not able to swim like you. For example, A says, let's run today, shall we? B, okay, but what about swimming? A, well, I'm not able to swim like you. So A is expressing his ability or inability to do something or not do something. So the 42nd type is expressing degree of certainty. No doubt, certainly I do that. For example, A says, multi-party system has completely degraded the economy of the country. B says, no doubt. C, certainly it has lost even its previous state of economy. The 43rd type is accepting, like if you accept something. So I shall be very glad, I shall be very glad to do this, or like with pleasure. For example, A says, would you like to have dinner with us? B, with pleasure. C says, I shall be very glad to have dinner together. The 44th type is denying. So the opposite to accepting is denying, right? Uh, so you'll use functions like, I'm afraid I can't. So this afraid does not mean that you are actually afraid or scared of something, but like this term If used in this way, then it means that you are denying, strongly denying to something. Like, I'm afraid I can't attend the party tonight, or like, that's not necessary. For example, A says, would you please go with me to the place? B says, I'm afraid I can't go now. C, otherwise, take this guidebook. B, thank you, but now that's not necessary. The 45th type is complaining. If you are complaining something to someone, then you'll use some words or sentences like, look here, I wish you'd arrived on time. I'm really sorry to trouble you, but I need to take this book away from you. Sorry. For example, wife says, look here, I wish you'd arrived on time. Husband, I'm really sorry to trouble you, but the meeting delays me. 46 type is reminding. I like to remind you that you need to submit this report by tomorrow. Or like, please don't forget we have a football match tomorrow. For example, assistant says, sir, I'd like to remind you there's a meeting at 5:30 p.m. today. Manager, please don't forget me to remind at earlier hour. Assistant, okay sir. 47 type is expressing opinions. Example, if you ask me this test is too difficult, my opinion is that it is easy. The example that is given here is S1 says, well, have you read the questions? S2 says, yes, I have. Is there anything special? S1 says, if you ask me, this test is too difficult. So he's basically expressing his opinions over something. S2 says, I don't think so. My opinion is that it is quite easy if you have studied well. So S1 and S2 are both expressing their opinions about a common thing. So 48 type is expressing your decisions. For example, I've made up my mind. I've decided to sell this building. So you have finally decided over something and you are just expressing your decisions. For example, A says, what have you decided about the building? B, I've made up my mind. A, oh, is it so? Let me hear. B says, I've decided to sell the building. A says, okay, I'll look for a customer then. 49 type is expressing opinions. If you want to express your opinions, then you might use words like, I believe that he has good impression on all. I trust him, he'll help us. For example, A says, can we have faith on him? B says, I believe that he has good impression on all. C says, I trust him, he'll help us. A says, let's go then. So the 50th type is expressing indecisions. So if you are confused or ambiguous about something, then you might use communicative functions like these. For example, I think I should change my mind, or I'm in much confusion what to do next. For example, S1 says, well, you have less money but many things to do. S2 says, I'm in much confusion what to do next. S3 says, you have to decide now, not to delay. S2 says, I think I should change my mind. I give priority to pay fees and buy books. So S1 says, good. The 51st type is defining. So if you are defining something, you are providing a definition to a certain term, then you might use something like it means, or like, what do you mean by education? It can be answered like, it can be answered like, it means uh, giving some form of knowledge about a specific topic to someone, or making it means to literate people or making them aware about something. For example, A says, what do you mean by education? And B defines it by saying, it means experience or light to the life. The 52nd type is expressing the predictions. So if you are predicting something, you don't yet know, but you are presuming or predicting something. So you'll use the communicative functions like, these exams will be held in April. I think she'll pass in first division. So the example that is written here or provided here is, S1 says, do you know when the exams start? S2 says, yeah, the exams will be held in April. S3 says, I think Meena will pass in first division this time. She has good preparation. So it's predicting, like, like she is predicting that Meena will pass in first division this time. So the 53rd type is supporting. If you support someone's decision or some person or some policies, then you might as well use this kind of function. So I'm in favor of Mr. Shaw. He'll have my support in election. The example that is given here is M1 says, listen, are you in favor of Mr. Jackson? M2 says, no, I'm not. I'm in favor of Mr. Shaw. He'll have my full support in the election. The 54th type is opposing or objecting to something or someone. So it's basically like opposite to supporting, right? So if you don't support someone, which generally means that you are opposing them. So the example that is given here is, who is not in favor of Mr. Jackson? Not in favor. He will not have my support in the election. So the example that is given here is M1 says, Mr. Shaw opposes Mr. Jackson. Sorry. M2 says, pardon me, who is not in favor of Mr. Jackson? M3 says, I'm against him. He will not have my support in the election. The 55th type is evaluating. So if you are valuing someone or passing a judgment or evaluating someone, so you might use communications functions like these. For example, he is a nice fellow. He deserves excellent position in the committee. The example that is given here is A says, he is a nice fellow. B says, truly, he deserves excellent position in the committee. C says, that's so because of his intelligence. So they are generally evaluating a person and passing their judgments based on their knowledge, right? The 56th type is stating assumption. So if you don't actually know something as a fact and you are providing your opinion or assuming something, for example, I think 15 people will come to the party. They assume that we are in fine position. For example, a conversation between Pradeep and Keshav. Pradeep asks, do you know how many people will come to the party? Keshav says, I think 15 people will come to the party. So it's basically assuming, right? He does not yet know, but he's basing his assumption obviously upon something. Pradeep asks, isn't it a large number? Keshav says, yes, but they assume that we are in a fine position. So he's basing his uh, basing his assumption or basing their assumption based upon their fine position. So the 57th type is identifying person. So again, if you identify a person as a certain adjective or providing certain comments just to identify the person, for example, that short fellow is Mr. Gurung. So this is basically to say that Mr. Gurung is being identified as a short person. He is the principal of the school. So the person that is uh, pronounced as he is also identified as being the principal of the school. So the example that is given here is G1 says, whom are you looking for? G2, the principal. Sorry, G2 says the principal. G3 says, that short fellow is Mr. Gurung, who is the principal of the school. G1 again says, thank you for the identification. So here basically Mr. Gurung, who is the principal of the school, is identified as a short person. So the 50th type is describing a process. So if you want to explain a certain process to someone, so you might use some uh, functions like these. First, take 100 steps to right and like move a bit ahead from there, then you'll reach the destination. And next, set a milestone or set an objective about where you want to take this organization. For example, F1 says, do you know how to make tea? F2 says, yeah, that's easy. F1 says, please describe the process. F2 is describing the process of making a tea, and he says, first take tea, which means the tea roast. First take tea, sugar, a kettle, and then Measure half glass of milk, full glass water, 1 spoonful tea. F1 asks, next. F2, next, set the kettle on fire, heat mixture of milk and water, put in the tea leaves. When it starts boiling, pour it in cups. Filter the tea with a sieve. Tea is ready for service. So basically F2 is describing a process of making a tea to F1, right? 59th type is narrating the actions. So basically narration means that if you do not actually belong to the story, but you are telling a story to someone in which there might be some characters, it does not necessarily needs to be a story. It might be an event. You might narrate an event. So we'll just try to see what narration actually means. For example, the terrorist told us to leave the place. So this is an action of, or like a speech of terrorist telling you to leave the place, but you are explaining it to someone, right? You're just telling it to someone. So you just say, terrorist told us to leave the place. Then he set a bomb in the corner of the room and the ground floor. So these are the events and you are explaining it to someone. For example, the police is asking here, will you please detail us how the building was destroyed? The witness says, the terrorists told us to leave the building. When they are assured that no one was inside, they set a powerful bomb in the room of the ground floor. After 2 minutes, it exploded and the building fell to the ground. So the witness is detailing or narrating the events or the story that happened earlier to the police. So you get it, right? What narration actually means. So the 60th type is reporting. So in reporting, there needs to be a direct speech and an indirect speech. The direct speech is John. John said. John said, or like John, we saw the event ourselves. Uh, an indirect speech will be something like Bob said that the event had occurred without any precautions. For example, police said John said that they had seen the event themselves. Bob said that the event had occurred without any precautions. So it is generally reporting, providing a report about something to someone. It might be short, it might be long. So these are the tenses or these are the manners that you use while reporting something to someone. The 61st and the last type, but not the least type, is apologizing. For example, I'm sorry, pardon me. The example that is given here is teacher says or teacher asks, did you complete the assignment? Student says, I'm sorry, I could not complete it. So he's basically apologizing for he could not completing it, for not completing it, right? Teacher asks why. Student says, I didn't get enough time. Teacher, you can't have excuse. Student says, please pardon me, I won't repeat it. So again he's apologizing. A teacher says, you must bring tomorrow. Student, I assure you I will. So these were basically the general types of communicative functions that we studied, and we ran a detail on this 9 type of communicative functions. So I hope you learned well in these 3 parts, and that was it for today. So this is the completion of unit 2 as well. Thank you.